Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support in helping our channel grow. We're aiming for 1,000 subscribers, so please support us by subscribing and helping us reach this milestone. Now let's start the story. I had always believed that marriage was about partnership, two people working together, growing together, supporting each other. And for years, that's exactly how I treated my wife. She was my priority. I admired her, respected her, and made sure she knew she was loved. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. It wasn't overnight. No, it was gradual, so slow that at first, I didn't even notice it happening. The woman I fell in love with, the one who once cared about us as a team, began to change. She stopped making an effort in our relationship. She stopped reciprocating. Affection and appreciation were replaced with an air of entitlement, as if my love and attention were things she was naturally owed rather than things that needed to be earned and given in return. At first, I ignored it. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe life had worn her down a bit. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that she'd snap out of it. But she didn't. Instead, she started carrying herself with this sense of superiority, like she was somehow above me, above our marriage. She no longer spoke to me like a husband, but like someone who should be grateful just to be in her presence. Compliments became expected, not appreciated. Any effort I made to make her happy was treated as the bare minimum. Meanwhile, she put in less and less. The balance between us had become completely one-sided, and I was the only one carrying the weight of our relationship. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was just a regular evening, nothing unusual. We were sitting in the living room, discussing plans for the weekend, when the conversation took a turn. I was thinking, I said, leaning back on the couch, we should do something together, just the two of us. Maybe go out of town for the weekend. She barely looked up from her phone. I don't know. I already told the girls I'd meet them for brunch Saturday. I hesitated. We haven't really spent time together lately. It'd be nice to. She sighed, cutting me off. Tony, I see you every day. Do we really need to schedule time like we're strangers? It's not about that. It's about making an effort, I said, keeping my tone even. Relationships require effort from both people. Her eyes finally lifted from the screen, but instead of understanding, all I saw was irritation. She scoffed, shaking her head like I had just said something ridiculous. Then she laughed, low and condescending. You really think I have to try for you? She said, tilting her head. Tony, I'm already here, aren't I? I stared at her, stunned into silence. It was the first time I truly saw just how far gone she was. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and said with complete confidence, I am the real prize in this marriage. I remember staring at her, waiting for some kind of laugh, a smirk, anything to indicate that she was joking. But there was nothing. She was completely serious. That's when it hit me. She actually believed it. In her mind, she wasn't my partner. She wasn't someone working alongside me to build a life together. No, she was something to be won, something that I should constantly be proving myself worthy of. I let out a breath, slow and steady. You really think that? I asked, keeping my voice calm. She shrugged, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I don't think it, Tony. I know it. I leaned back, studying her, the woman I had once admired, the woman I had spent years loving, supporting, and prioritizing. But the more I looked, the less I recognized her. It was like I had been blinded for so long, and now, suddenly, everything was clear. You know, I said, my voice quieter now, I always thought marriage was about two people choosing each other every day. I thought it was about love, respect, about giving just as much as you take. She rolled her eyes again, exasperated. Oh, spare me the lecture, Tony. You're acting like I don't do anything in this relationship. I didn't respond right away, because, honestly, that was exactly what I was thinking. For years, I had made her feel valued. I had treated her like someone special, and in return, she had convinced herself that she was above me, that my role was to chase her, to earn her approval, to fight every day just to keep her happy while she did nothing in return. It was like a switch flipped inside me. I wasn't angry, at least not in the way you might expect. I didn't explode. I didn't argue. I didn't even try to reason with her. Because at that moment, I realized something far more important. She was no longer the woman I married. She had become a version of herself that I didn't recognize, one that I didn't respect, one that I didn't want. And if she truly believed she was some untouchable prize, then maybe it was time for her to see just how quickly a prize loses its value when no one's competing for it. So I didn't react. I didn't argue. I simply let her words settle between us. In that silence, a decision started forming in my mind. I didn't say anything after she called herself the real prize in our marriage. I didn't argue, didn't roll my eyes or scoff like she had done so many times before. I just sat there, letting the weight of her words sink in. And in that silence, I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep playing this game. The next morning, I woke up feeling different, lighter, clearer. It was like a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had suddenly lifted. For so long, I had been operating under the belief that it was my job to keep our relationship afloat. That if things fell off, I needed to fix them. If she was distant, I needed to bridge the gap. If she was cold, I needed to warm things up. But not anymore. If she was a prize, then she could sit up on her pedestal alone. So I stopped. I stopped going out of my way to compliment her. I stopped showering her with attention. I stopped making those little gestures that she had long since stopped appreciating. If she was expecting me to chase after her, to fight for her approval, she was about to be very disappointed. At first, she didn't seem to notice. She carried herself the same way, acting as if nothing had changed. But I had changed. And while she might not have realized it yet, that change was about to shake the foundation of everything she had taken for granted. A week passed. Then two. One evening, as she walked into the house, she ran a hand through her freshly styled hair and smiled, waiting for my reaction. "Did you not notice my hair?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. Of course, I had noticed. Once, I would have jumped at the opportunity to tell her how amazing she looked, how beautiful she was, how the new cuts suited her perfectly. But now, I simply glanced up, gave a neutral shrug, and said, "Yeah, looks nice." That was it. No over-the-top praise. No excessive admiration. She blinked, clearly waiting for more. But I had already turned my attention back to my laptop. I could feel her eyes on me, expecting me to backtrack, to realize my mistake and shower her with the attention she thought she deserved. But I didn't. And that was just the beginning. I stopped texting her throughout the day to check in. Stopped asking if she wanted anything when I grabbed coffee. Stopped being her constant source of validation. Most importantly, I stopped reacting to her passive-aggressive jabs. For the first time in our marriage, she wasn't the center of my attention. At first, she acted like it didn't bother her, like it was beneath her to care. But I saw the cracks forming, the way she'd glance at me, expecting me to cave, the way she'd throw out little comments meant to bait me into reassuring her. And then, one night at dinner, she finally snapped. "You've been acting strange lately," she said, trying to sound casual, but there was an edge to her voice. "Something wrong?" I took a slow sip of my drink, met her gaze, and said simply, "Nope." She frowned. "You sure?" "Yeah." Silence. She was waiting for me to fix something, to comfort her, to smooth things over like I always had. But I wasn't playing that role anymore. She had spent so much time treating me like I was lucky to have her. But for the first time, I could see it in her eyes. She was starting to wonder if maybe she had been the lucky one all along. I wasn't just done chasing after her. I was done wasting my energy on someone who didn't appreciate it. For years, my focus had been on keeping our marriage afloat, making sure she felt valued, making sure she was happy. But what about me? When was the last time I had done something purely for myself? Not to impress her, not to maintain peace, just because I wanted to. I honestly couldn't remember. So I made a choice. Instead of pouring all my effort into a woman who saw me as beneath her, I turned my attention inward. The first thing I did was hit the gym hard. I had always been in decent shape, but I had let myself get comfortable. I wasn't out of shape, but I also wasn't at my best. That changed. I started training seriously, weightlifting, cardio, refining my diet. I wasn't just working out to look better. I was working out to feel better, stronger, more in control. The physical changes came quickly. My body became leaner, my posture more confident. I started walking differently, carrying myself differently. And the funny thing? People noticed. Not just people. Women noticed. I wasn't actively looking for attention, but I got it anyway. At work, at the gym, even in casual social settings. Women would strike up conversations, hold eye contact a little longer than necessary, flash those knowing smiles. And that's when it hit me. I hadn't needed my wife's validation. I had just been conditioned to seek it. Because for so long, she had made me believe she was the only woman who mattered. She wasn't. I started dressing better. Not in expensive, flashy outfits, just well-fitted, stylish clothes that made me feel good. I updated my haircut, took better care of my skin. Every day, I looked in the mirror and saw a version of myself that I hadn't seen in a long time. A man with options. And it wasn't just about my appearance. I threw myself into self-improvement on every level. I started reading more, taking on new challenges at work, and networking with influential people in my industry. I enrolled in courses, sharpened my skills, and expanded my knowledge. I became a man who didn't just exist, he thrived. Meanwhile, my wife had started to notice. At first, she tried to act like nothing was different, like my sudden shift in focus didn't bother her. But she wasn't fooling anyone. I could see the way she watched me when I got dressed, the way her eyes lingered when she thought I wasn't paying attention. She started asking questions. "You've been spending a lot of time at the gym," she said one evening as I pulled on my sneakers. "Trying to impress someone?" I smiled, but didn't give her the reaction she wanted. "Just working on myself." She laughed, but it was forced. Right. Well, don't get too fit. I like you the way you were. I didn't respond, because the truth was, she didn't care how I looked before. She just cared that now other people did. She wasn't used to this version of me. The one who didn't hang on her every word, who didn't constantly seek her approval, who didn't feel the need to reassure her every 5 minutes. She had spent years convincing herself that she was the prize. But now, she was starting to realize that maybe I was the one worth winning all along. At first, she pretended like nothing was wrong, like my shift in focus, my improvements, my detachment were all things she'd barely noticed. But I knew better. I could see the way she watched me now. It wasn't with the same smugness she used to carry. There was something else, something that almost looked like doubt. She wasn't used to this version of me, the one who didn't constantly orbit around her, who didn't act like she was the center of my universe. And that's when the real shift started. She began testing me. Little remarks here and there. Snide comments disguised as jokes. Subtle attempts to get under my skin, to provoke me, to make me react. "You've been really into your looks lately," she said one night as I was getting ready to head to the gym. "Didn't realize you were so insecure." I didn't even look at her as I tied my shoes. "I'm not." "Well, spending that much time on yourself kind of screams midlife crisis, don't you think?" I chuckled, not because she was funny, but because I saw right through her. "You can call it whatever you want," I said as I grabbed my keys. "Doesn't change anything." And then I left. That was the moment, I think, when she realized something she hadn't considered before. I wasn't reacting to her anymore. For years, she had controlled the tone of our marriage. If she was cold, I tried to warm things up. If she was dismissive, I worked harder for her attention. If she pushed me away, I chased after her. But now she could say whatever she wanted, throw whatever little dig she felt like, and I just didn't care. I had options, and that scared her. She started making excuses to be around me more. If I was heading out to meet some friends, she'd suddenly decide she wanted a date night. If I was on my phone, she'd glance over and casually ask, "Who are you texting?" If I was getting dressed up, she'd throw out some passive-aggressive comment like, "Hope whoever you're trying to impress likes that shirt." She was scrambling, trying to reassert the control she once had. But it was too late. The more she tried, the less I engaged. I wasn't rude. I wasn't cruel. I was just indifferent. And nothing unnerved her more than that. One night, as I was about to head out, she finally dropped the act. "You don't look at me the same way anymore," she said, her voice quieter than usual. I stopped at the door and turned to face her. She was standing there in the dim light of the hallway, arms crossed, brows slightly furrowed. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't speaking with arrogance. She looked uncertain. I studied her for a moment, then gave her the truth. "That's because I don't see you the same way anymore." Her lips parted slightly like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. I didn't wait for her to find them. I just gave her a small nod and walked out the door. For the first time in years, I was finally living my life on my terms. After that night, things between us were different. She knew it. I knew it. She stopped throwing little jabs, stopped making passive-aggressive remarks, stopped trying to act like she was still untouchable. Because deep down, I think she finally understood she had lost something. Not me. She had lost the version of me that worshipped her, the version that hung onto her every word, that worked tirelessly to keep her happy, that once believed she was some kind of irreplaceable treasure. And now, she was starting to panic. She became more affectionate, touching my arm when she spoke, laughing at my jokes a little too hard, lingering in the kitchen when I made coffee, as if waiting for me to notice her. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. Then came the night that shattered her illusion completely. We were at a party, one of those gatherings with mutual friends. Lots of people, lots of energy. The kind of event where she used to shine, where she expected to be the center of attention, admired and envied. But this time, she wasn't the one people were looking at. She wasn't the one surrounded by conversation, drawing people in effortlessly, commanding the room. I was. I had changed, and people noticed. My confidence, my presence, my energy, it was different now. I wasn't the man who once stood quietly at her side while she absorbed all the attention. I wasn't the husband dutifully nodding along as she spoke about herself. I was the one people were drawn to, women included. I saw her watching me. I could feel it. The way her eyes followed me from across the room. The way her posture stiffened whenever another woman laughed at something I said. The way her fingers clenched around her glass when she saw a particularly attractive woman place a hand on my arm during a conversation. And for the first time, she was the one who felt small. The moment that broke her happened near the end of the night. I was standing near the bar, talking to a few people, 2 men and a woman. The conversation flowed easily, and I could feel the woman's interest. She wasn't being obvious, but it was there. The way she leaned in slightly when I spoke, the way she smiled, making direct eye contact, holding it just a second longer than necessary. My wife saw it. That's when she cracked. She stormed over, stepping between me and the woman like she was staking a claim. "What are you doing?" she snapped, her voice sharp, eyes flashing with something close to desperation. I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "I'm your wife." I let those words hang in the air for a moment. Then, with the calmest expression I could manage, I simply said, "Wife? You said you were a prize." Well, I stopped competing. Her face froze. For the first time since this all started, she had no response. I didn't say another word. I didn't argue. I didn't explain myself. I just turned and walked away. And as I did, I knew she finally understood what it felt like to be the one left behind. After that night, everything changed. She didn't try to pretend anymore. The facade, the confidence, the superiority, the way she carried herself like she was above me, it was gone. All that was left was a woman who realized she had made a terrible mistake. She tried to fix things. I knew she would. Suddenly, she was cooking my favorite meals, asking about my day, complimenting me like she used to, back when we were still in love. She became more affectionate, reaching for my hand while we watched TV, lingering in the doorway when I was getting dressed, hoping I'd look at her the way I once did. But the problem was, I couldn't see her the same way anymore. She wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with. That woman had been kind, supportive, someone who valued our relationship. This version, the one who had spent years acting like she was doing me a favor by being my wife, she had killed whatever love I once had for her. I didn't hate her. I just didn't care anymore. She must have sensed it because one night, she finally asked the question she had been avoiding. "Are we okay?" I looked at her for a long moment, considering how to answer. She was standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, like she was bracing for the impact of whatever I was about to say. So I told her the truth. "No, we're not." Her eyes flickered with something. Panic, sadness, maybe even regret. "I can do better," she said quickly. "I see it now. I was wrong." I nodded. "Yeah, you were." Silence. She waited for me to say something else, to give her some kind of reassurance. But there was nothing left to say. That's when she finally realized I was done. A few days later, I filed for divorce, not out of anger, not to punish her, just because I didn't want this life anymore. I didn't need her to be happy. I had built myself back up, found my confidence, and remembered that I was never lacking. The only thing that had ever held me back was believing that she was something irreplaceable. She wasn't. When I told her, she didn't react at first. She just stared at the papers in front of her, fingers gripping the edge of the table like she needed to steady herself. "You're serious?" she asked. "Yeah," I said simply. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh, shaking her head. "You don't have to do this. We can fix things. We can." "No, we can't," I cut in. "You don't get it. I'm not angry. I'm not hurt. I'm just sick of this, sick of your attitude. Sick of the way you act like you're some kind of queen who deserves everything while treating me like I'm beneath you." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about? You spent years humiliating me, making me feel like I was lucky to have you. Like you were some kind of prize that I had to work for. But look at me now. I don't need you anymore. I don't need anyone to validate me. You thought you were the prize and that everyone should worship you, but now you're nothing compared to me." She blinked rapidly, like she was trying to process the weight of my words. For years, she had dictated the terms of our marriage, deciding when I was worthy of affection, when I should feel grateful, when I should chase after her. But now, the rules had changed, and she had no say in it. I was happy being who I was before, but your constant need to put me down, to make me feel small, changed me. You forced me to change. You humiliated me for so long that I had to become this version of myself just to survive. You turned me into someone you'd never be able to control again. And now, I'm better than you. I don't need you. I don't even want you. But I love you. She tried, her voice softer now, almost pleading. I met her gaze, steady and unwavering. Maybe, but not in a way that matters anymore. Silence stretched between us. I could see the realization settle in, the way her shoulders tensed, the way her lips parted slightly like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. And then, just like that, it was over. After I left, I heard from mutual friends that she struggled. She wasn't the prize anymore. No one was lining up to worship her, to put her on a pedestal. The attention she had once taken for granted had disappeared. And me? I was thriving. I was in the best shape of my life, excelling in my career, traveling, meeting new people. I had options. And for the first time in years, I was truly happy. She thought she was the one worth chasing, but in the end, it was me who walked away, without ever looking back. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.